Yeah, and I think a cool thing for me is I wanted to take this story that, that one would think should be done as a live action film. It's kind of a story that could be done as live action. So the reason I'm doing it with animation is I'm looking to make it so real that at times you're thinking that it's a real person, and that to see, to capture the human emotions, and animate these characters to be real. Meanwhile, not using any real actors. I mean, that's going to be really exciting and cool to see. I'm Harrison Killian. I'm a sculptor, an animator, and a musician, and I study human anatomy and the movement of humans, and that sort of enables me to create these characters that are very realistic for animation. I started around 2012 doing short claymation films, and a few years later, I produced my first music video, which was an animated short, and that went on to be screened at over 20 film festivals globally, including Sundance, Mill Valley, and Catalina, and it also won some awards as well. And so my current film is been in production for the past 5 years, or sorry, development and then pre-production for the past 5 years. And I wrote a screenplay which was feature length, that won some awards and was placed on something called the Red List on Coverfly, which is a list of highest industry scoring screenplays. So I took a 5 minute segment of that and culled that from the feature screenplay, which I'm producing as a short film to market and showcase the upcoming feature length film, which I'd like to produce in the future. And to do this, I've developed. I used to uh, really focus on claymation, which is clay animation, frame by frame, where you're manipulating a physical object for each frame. And then I sort of got more into using armatures and making molds for these characters so that they were more, fabricating so that they were more uh, capable of being used for the films that I was trying to produce. And when I was doing that, I sort of started honing my abilities with sculpting, and then got into portraiture sculpting and doing like realistic sculptures, both life size and miniature. And and so with that, I then developed this animation method, which I'm using for my current animated short, Rider on the Storm, which is uh, fuses stop motion animation with CG. So you have the majority of the film is stop motion, but a lot of it involves CG facial animation and different effects that sort of create a very realistic looking character. So it's unique in that way.
Yeah. So I know some this kind of technique, like because we know we are there are some 24 images per second. It takes
Yes.
lot of time to to do the all the action basically of the scene. Um, can you tell
Yeah.
me more about it? Because do you have to make 24 moves per second, or because it takes a lot of time?
Yeah, so it's very time consuming, and it does take just developing the characters to begin with takes a lot of time, but it takes, I would say, a lot of patience to sit and um, you know animate these objects and sort of make them come to life. And there's a lot of study that goes on with um, you know simulating like realistic movement, and you'll often use like a real So I'm about to go into production on this. I'm actually just finishing up pre-production, which was designing sets and characters, everything like that, and getting certain rights and things like that for music. Um, but there's also a big part of it that goes with the facial animation, which I had to take some courses and really study human anatomy in order to pull off a high fidelity character. And there is a process that to briefly describe what I'm doing for the facial animation that is CG, so done on the computer. It starts off with planes of the head, basically, where you're sculpting a mesh um, uh, that consists of vertices, edges, and faces. Polygonal mesh, in other words, on the computer. And you start off by creating planes of the head, and then you sort of go into facial features, and you get facial context, and um, you sculpt the person based off of their age, weight, ethnicity, um, and then you have to retopologize the thing, which means that you're generating an optimal model from the sculpture that you made on the computer, because it takes so much RAM, so much storage on the computer to be able to do this kind of thing. Um, so you're basically it's a process where you're tracing the polygonal structure that you created, um, and creating something that is more optimal. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to put it. Um, there's basically two reasons why you need to optimize this mesh, because you're sculpting with millions of polygons, basically.
Okay. How, how,
Um,
how did you get inspired to do this project, to make this project?
um, well, a lot of my inspiration came from Wes Anderson, the filmmaker who did Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, and his sort of style was really something that influenced me. And also Tim Burton with his animated films, and going back, Will Vinton with the claymation films that he did, and Ray Harryhausen. So, a lot of stop motion influence, but I also really enjoy um, Chris Jones is a popular artist from Australia who does hyper realistic facial animation, which is what I'm describing. And he's been a huge influence to me, and also a big help in terms of getting um, this technique down to be able to use.
Okay. And have you been to the film school or not?
Yeah, so I went to school for photography and graphic design. I took some online film school courses, and some uh, yeah, I haven't actually attended film school, but I did do a lot online, and most of my experience comes from uh, actually doing jobs that were film related and doing short films. Um, when I was in California for a short time. I'm currently in New York, but while I was there, I had the opportunity to work on some really cool projects.
Okay, okay. Can you tell me some maybe for the I know you're about to make a new one, but maybe the previous project. Do you have some anecdotes maybe?
Yeah,
And talk
it
the
was
the
a
work the
sorry, what's that?
workload, the so much work you have to put on it, and yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So the last one was really interesting. The one that I did that went to those film festivals. It won many awards, but when I started doing it, it sort of turned into a much bigger project than I initially thought it was going to be. It consisted of me going out in the woods and physically, taking things like ferns and twigs and little trees and things like that, and bringing them inside and actually making these massive miniature sets that would fill up an entire room. And it was a really exciting thing. And at the time, I started just learning as I was going about animation. Um, but there was a big process with, you know when I was actually making these outdoor miniature sets, the things that I was making them with would wilt and go bad, and I would immediately have to go and start replacing them. So that was just one part of it. And then actually making the characters, when you're using something that's not that you haven't made a mold with, that you can reproduce it with, just clay. Oftentimes you'll make mistakes, and a character can get damaged or something, and that can lead to a whole nother uh, you're resculpting constantly, and it's very long process. But I think that's why, as you're learning to fabricate these characters, it aspect in itself.
Okay. So yeah, it looks like this training is like uh, it takes a lot of time to know the techniques, and what else? It's very, I think, interesting in a way that you can create something based on these techniques, right?
Yeah, yeah, and another thing is that when I'm sculpting these characters now, I 3D scan them with a process called photogrammetry, which is where you light the object, and then you sort of get um many pictures, basically encompassing the 360 head. And then I use that on the computer, and as I was saying, resculpt or whatever, or even sculpt them on the computer. But most times I will sculpt them by hand and then 3D scan them for use in facial animation for these characters. So, and I really love both stop motion and CG. I find that um, there are certain there are certain things about them that can't be reproduced in one or the other. So you can use them in conjunction with each other to create a certain effect. And I know that this has been done, the use of CGI and stop motion, but it's not really something that's used to create hyper realism the way that I'm trying to do.
Okay. So, but which camera you're gonna use for this type of project, and the lenses basically? Uh,
Well, I started out. I actually purchased a Hasselblad, which is a very high performance camera just for this project. and which is me also medium format, um, because I felt as though it would pick up a certain tone and feeling with the images that DSLRs, regular cameras wouldn't be able to necessarily. But at the moment, I think I might have to. I'm gonna have to use something like a um, what is it? Sony Alpha. Um, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Sony Alpha series. I forget the one that I was just checking out, but that line of cameras is actually really uh,
So it's like it's not a DSLR. It's another type. That's all right. Yeah, it
right.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. There's the many types of camera, of course, and yeah. So you're not going to use the DSLR.
Yeah, so no, I feel as though DSLRs, they're great. Uh, there are some pretty advanced DSLRs out there, and things like the D50 500 even, which is on the lower end uh, of the cost of these things. Uh, I think I think even something like that is great, and you can get um, you can definitely shoot stop motion on something like that. But I'd like to have something that produces great color grading and
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I was thinking, I do you what was it called again? Do you film or are you going to take pictures? It's like are you going to take 24 pictures, 24 frames per second? What?
right. So it's right. So it's 24 frames per second, which means that you're shooting uh, each frame uh, in a second. That means that there's 24 frames. So essentially, if you had a 5 minute clip, you're talking about thousands and thousands of frames that you have to shoot. And if you could imagine um, sitting there and animating an object, moving it so that it's for each of those frames, and taking a picture, then moving the object, taking a picture. It's extremely time consuming and takes a lot of patience for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Okay, okay. And what about the light? Because you have to make 24 frames per second. What about the light? You have to change all the settings or
Well, so essentially, you want the light to stay consistent throughout. That's a big part of it. So, you know, what I'll do is I'll block, make sure that there's no light coming in, or even use it's best to use a room that has no windows at all. But so the lighting is there's several different types of lighting that I use, for these shots, because I try to get it's it's a very cool, interesting process. You set up these miniature sets, and you're looking to get them to appear as real as possible. And that's a whole art form in itself. So sometimes I'll use different variety of different lighting, like butterfly, clamshell lighting, Rembrandt, split cross lighting, backlighting, and sort of create a very dramatic effect for these miniature sets. And you do want it to stay as consistent as possible, but oftentimes with a certain shot, you might want to have some kind of movement with the light, or like a spotlight or something like that. And in that case, you'd use a track, which it's a motorized track system. So essentially, um, this light setup that you have uh, correlates with the camera. So every frame that you take, you're able to adjust the camera, to get the type of movement that you want. But that's where I think motorized gimbals and camera heads and tripods and tracks, all those things allow you to shoot advanced, animation frame by frame, and it's very methodical. So if you mess up, you can go back and redo the whole thing in the same exact way. Um, so yeah, I do use motorized systems oftentimes, and heads for lights, incorporating that sort of thing.
Yeah, so image, light, and what about the sound? So
So the sound is actually something that comes in post. Well, uh, actually, you start out with the voicing of the characters, because then the animators use that as a reference to animate from. But um, when you are in post production, oftentimes you'll take those voices and edit them, clean them up, do a lot of post production. Then oftentimes you'll have the score for the film, which is done in post production. So I myself am a musician, so I'll be doing some aspects of the score myself, as I usually do for my films. And I also intend on hiring a few musicians and people who are going to help with the engineering of the sound and cleaning things up. So that can be an extensive process in itself. Um, so I think that's why, when you're breaking up uh, a timeline for a film, it's important that you have those dates set, because that's something for animation that usually comes afterward.
yeah, you need to see the bigger picture basically of the project. Otherwise,
Right,
otherwise
right.
you're gonna get overwhelmed and yeah, swamped basically. Yeah, it's too.
Yeah, and I believe I think it's something that, um, in the editing process, you can it's actually a fun thing because you can bring people in, an editor, and you're sitting there and reviewing basically everything that you've shot, and watching it. Uh, that I think is one of the most enjoyable parts, is being able to edit your work after you've shot it. It's the quality will inevitably be much better than if you're not. But um, I think, um, as you are, sorry, I'm just thinking.
It's all right. I don't know. Sometimes it could be your best experience for this kind of project because it's kind of big. You start with an idea and then you grow this project. It's like, okay, it looks like big. It
Yeah,
might be, it's gonna be big, but it's doable. It's
yeah,
doable because I'm passionate about it and I'm gonna do it no matter the time and no matter the means.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna do it.
yeah, and that's the thing, is it's a big cost and a lot of time. And as you're saying, when you're very passionate about it, oftentimes, um, it's been a huge influence to me to watch other animators that, actually a few of them, such as someone named Matt Duran, who worked on many films like Coraline and Fantastic Mr. Fox and Corpse Bride, and many of those animated stop motion animated films. He was actually a character fabricator who sort of, I was really inspired by, and I reached out to, and he was extremely helpful in giving me some ideas in terms of how they do things at an industrial level for these films. But that sort of thing, really sparks an influence in someone. When they get to talk to someone who they really look up to like that, and see how they're doing it, and watching people like Aardman, who did Wallace and Gromit, and other films like that. It's really amazing watching their manipulate um, an object, a mesh. And so there's a whole process of getting the facial animation rigging set up correctly to use with, with these characters that I created, because actually getting it to be, movable and animate the thing is a lot harder than, you know, or can be just as hard as creating it. So that's a whole other process. And one of the a company that I hired to help me with that was um, Polywink, which is a company based in Paris, France, and I'm in the United States. So that was a cool process, getting to speak with them and develop that aspect of the animation.
Yeah. So do you choose these companies based on their skills or yeah,
Yeah, yeah, oftentimes it's it's so niche what I'm working in that you'll have to, as I said, outsource and find people from various parts of the world that specialize in either making miniature clothing, or doing something in particular like that with computer animation, where they specialize in it, and and they have um, they're well known or have a lot of accolades, and that sort of is something that sticks out to you, and makes you want to reach out to them to try to work with them. So I think reputation is big, because you're going to want to hire those people which are well known in the industry for that thing. But it can be hard to outsource, because you have to find these niche people. And I've kind of heard in the stop motion world, I've heard it referred to as a traveling circus, because these people are off, people that specialize in things for stop motion, like creating one thing or another, will often uh, be involved in many of the same projects. They'll often be used for, if someone's doing a stop motion film in Canada, they'll be up there doing that. If someone's in wherever, they're gonna be over there. And a lot of times it's a community, so you sort of get to meet these people and get to know them, and you know, that's kind of how it works. So it's been really cool for me too, in the community on social media and things like that, to be able to talk to these experts and get their knowledge. And so I think that was something for me with the film festivals and the recognition that I got with that. I was able to get the attention of those experts, who who I've been who I dreamed of getting them to check out my work. So now it's kind of cool because some of them are interested in working on my current film, and these are people that I've always looked up to, and now they're expressing interest in working on my current animated project because it's something that is unique to them.
Yeah, because you started with this project and you shoot some sequences, and then you attract other people because they heard about it, and so on and so on, right?
Yeah, and it's really cool because you start out, as I said, with a screenplay. Usually, in my case, I'm writing the screenplay, but oftentimes you'll start having ideas of what the concepts of the scenes are going to look like. So you'll produce, I actually produce concept art for many of the scenes that I'm going to be shooting, and a storyboard to, sort of let the animators know very just get the gist of what you're looking for in a scene, or the set designers or whoever may be trying to develop the story and the characters and things like that. So I really enjoy doing the concept art and things like that. And when you get past that point, when the sets start to be developed and the characters and things like that, along with the script, you then do something called an animatic, which is a um, very rough animation for certain scenes to give an animators an idea of what you're looking for. So yeah,
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, tell me, what is your best experience so far?
um, in terms of I would say my best experience.
Yeah, it could be on set, it could be offset, of course, based on these projects. Uh,
Yeah, I think my best experience was thus far was actually getting this advanced animation technique that I've developed to work, because for years I was studying facial animation, computer animated facial animation, because I found that, as I said, stop motion has a certain feeling that can't necessarily be recreated with the computer. That's physical objects and things like that. It sort of jumps out at you, but at the same time, I really love the computer animation and the things that can be done with that. So for me, I was developing this technique because I've seen other big artists out there, such as Chris Jones, do these hyper realistic facial animation. You're like, wow, that really looks like a person. It's kind of it's hard sometimes to distinguish if it's a real person or not if you achieve this high fidelity portrait. So at a point, I kind of was worried that I wouldn't be able to get this technique to work, or that I wouldn't be able to get, that I didn't have the knowledge to put it together enough. Um, which again, I also had help from the company Polywink, based in Paris, that sort of helped me develop the um, aspects of that. But I think the biggest moment, the most exciting thing to me, was when I finally got this technique working, and that I was really convinced that it at times did look like a human. This portrait, digital um, human that I created. So yeah, and it is a big process. I don't know if you want me to go more actually what
yeah,
um,
We can talk about it because I was so you're in the middle of process. Do you know how long it's gonna take?
So for 5 minutes, I'm actually my current film, Rider on the Storm. The difference is I'm actually going to be hiring some people, as I said, that have shown interest in working on this, and some of them are well known in the industry, have worked in it for a long time. I'm going to bring them on, and which is definitely going to speed up the production process and allow me to do things I otherwise might not be able to do without that sort of team. Um, and I believe, for a 5 minute animated short, I think I could do it within, or I know that I could do it within, um, uh, by, let's say, right, April of 2024 is where I'm looking to be. Um, actually been developing the sets and the characters, as I said, and now I'm finally getting into the point that I'm hiring people with the proper funding. So with the crowdfunding campaign that I sent you, it's actually going to be used for hiring certain talent to help me animate this film. Um, and get through that, and for studio expenses and things like that. But this is going to be a really groundbreaking film. I know for sure. And my last film, as I said, was at some you know very big film festivals, and it did receive um, high accolades, and the one that I had previously done and some of the other ones. So I think that, and that was years ago when I was, when these techniques that I was using were so primitive and, not as nearly as developed as what I'm doing now. So now, years later, I believe going back to these film festivals with this film, I'll be able to market it and use it to sell the feature length version of the screenplay.
Okay, right. So you talk about the crowdfunding for this project. Can you talk about it? Can you tell me more? How you introduce, how you you
Okay, so Uh, it, the crowdfunding campaign that I've started for my film is a very exciting opportunity for Kickstarters and people who are interested in this kind of project to be involved in this groundbreaking new animated film, which I believe the technique will um, could change the use of animation in film, and with the combination of stop motion, I think it's something very unique and different. Um, so with the Kickstarter, as I was saying, I've done these head sculpts and these very realistic characters. There are several rewards involved that you can get as if you pledge for this Kickstarter. Every reward, even $1 gets every pledge, even $1 gets a reward. Um, and there are some really cool things on there, like head sculpts and
that yeah, I was ask you to mention them. What is the rewards? But you mentioned it. You started mentioning them. Yeah.
right. And yeah. So one of the cool things is um, that you will receive also. You can get uh, screen credit on the film, so that's like actually on the film, and we'll give you a private screening, and you'll get DVDs, signed DVDs, and things like that. So if you check out, I did do a promotional video when you go to the Kickstarter, which is sort of a an example of of one of these characters that are going to be in the film, sort of giving a presentation. Um,
I, I will drop a link in bio in the description, basically. Yeah.
yeah, I greatly appreciate that. And if you check it out, it is you'll be able to read more about the log line, about the actual story and the feature length version of the story, which this short is actually culled from.
Okay. Okay. Uh, do you, about the crowdfunding? That's all right. What else you can say?
So, also, I wanted to tell you more about the actual story itself and what it's about.
Please go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
So, the story, Ryder on the Storm, it actually tells the story of a young boy named Ryder who was orphaned at the age of 7, and he endures a decade of bullying by other orphans and abuse at the hands of a tyrannical head matron. Um, his only solace are his dreams of freedom and life outside of the orphanage. And so at 17, Ryder finally stands up to the biggest bully in the orphanage, which is a turning point in his life. Um, then, facing the wrath of this head matron, he makes a desperate run for it from the orphanage, leading him to these dense woods behind the orphanage and up a steep cliff that rises up into the woods. Um, and um, as he's climbing this cliff behind the orphanage, he's making a run for it. He sort of dislodges a massive boulder from the cliff, and unbeknownst to Ryder, the cliff crashes down the orphanage and through the forest, um, landing onto the orphanage's yard and killing the head matron. Um, so um, so Ryder's sort of on the run, from this orphanage, and he's unbeknownst to him, he's now killed this head matron and is wanted for murder. Um, and the feature length version of that is, because that was 5 minutes, which was culled from a feature length screenplay. The actual feature version is he's going across the country with his mother's ashes to release them from the Golden Gate Bridge in a way to, sort of free himself um, from this imprisonment of being in this, orphanage for his entire life and not having his mother. The only thing that he has to his name is his mother's ashes and a makeshift sack on his back. And so he sets off across the country, in search for freedom and to release his mother's ashes. And along the way, he meets a war torn Vietnam vet as he's hopping trains and living the life of a vagabond as people often did in the 60s. The film is based in the 60s. It's a timepiece. So the actual title, Rider on the Storm, is inspired by The Doors, the music group The Doors, and it's not actually about the Doors, but it's inspired by um, stories that were told within the writings of Jim Morrison and poetry, where he would talk about things like jumping on trains and traveling across the country, and I think this film sort of encompasses uh, certain aspects of his music and stories that he told within them. So, uh, so the film is not about the Doors, but it's actually, it's inspired by their music and will feature music by the Doors. But so the feature length version is something in itself. But this 5 minute segment for Rider on the Storm, the short film, will be used to showcase that feature length
Okay.
film.
Okay. Short film that could be a feature film, basically. That's the ambition. That's
Exactly.
the meaning of this project, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So how? So 5 minutes short film. How long is gonna be the feature film? Do you think?
So the feature film would be 90 minutes. The screenplay is actually 90 pages. And, initially it was longer. It actually started out as a 500-page manuscript for more like something like a book. And so I had to really, really cut that down and make it into something that's really lean and ready for production.
Uh,
And
you can maybe use this material of 500 pages and turn it into a book, basically. You can.
yeah, yeah, I think it would be a good idea because the original story itself actually features um, some exciting points in the story that aren't necessarily in because as you know when you're creating a film you really have to cut out a lot um, which can be very from other animated films is its groundbreaking animation technique that I developed that fuses stop motion with the precision of CG to create this imagery that blurs the line between reality and animation. And I think the result is a visual experience that leaves the audience questioning if what they are seeing is animated or real. Um, and it's a really cool process of actually doing you know like you said, the lighting and everything like that, because it actually makes a big difference in terms of how realistic, a character can be. And using real hair and things like that, I think, in the physical models that I'm 3D scanning, um, and then incorporating that sort of thing, it can create, it adds a lot of realism. So there are certain nuances to these characters that I believe are really stand out.
Yeah, because I watched this short sequence, short video uh, introducing this project on Kickstarter. It's like you have this CGI stuff, and then you have different layers on the human flesh.
Yes,
And so,
yes,
what? So it looks like humans, but you need to make it real, basically, right?
yeah. So essentially, it starts off. Um, there's something called what you're doing is. Let me just think for a second. So, sorry, I'm just looking.
That's all right.
Okay, so I'll tell you when I'm going to start. I'm just sort of getting my.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I'm ready. So in 3D computer graphics and modeling, there's something called mesh or polygonal mesh, and it is essentially a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that define the shape of a polyhedral object. So basically, an object that's based off of polygons or made up of polygons. The faces usually consist of triangles, quadrilaterals, or other simple convex polygons. Um, so basically, that's I'm describing what I am, what you start out with, and it's so you're literally starting out if you were sculpting something digitally or on the computer, you start out with a mesh that consists of polygons, and as you do something called you subdivide that, which sort of creates more detail to sculpt on. So you need a very high-end computer to do this kind of thing because it has to be able to handle that kind of processing. And um, and so with the layers that you were describing that I was breaking away, there are different there is information. So you start out with this base mesh, right? And you subdivide it to get millions of polygons. So you're working with like a lot of information, it's sculpting on it. So the more polygons there are, the more detail there can be for that sculpture per se. So the layers that you were describing that break away are actually baked information. So you're taking all that very high resolution data and baking it into a something that's more optimized, something that doesn't take up so much processing power on the computer. So I was sort of in that video. You're seeing a breakaway of um, these various maps and textures, skin textures and wrinkles and things like that that make up the actual model or the character that I was showing. And one of the biggest processes is rigging for that character. So let's say you have a model that's on the computer, and it's that I'm describing a mesh that's made up of polygons. uh, it doesn't just move. So you have to actually create a virtual skeleton for that thing, just like you would a human, that allows you to animate the face or the body or whatever it is. Um, and it's kind of a convoluted process that I won't, go too much into. But the rigging is basically where you set up assets that can be animated, um, like a controller for the actual character. I'm trying to think of how I can describe this. Um, so just like a real human skeleton, there are joints and things like that, and you have to actually um, implement that into this mesh. So yeah, it's a very long, extensive process of creating these characters. But so the character that I was showing on that preview for the Kickstarter is is something that I sculpted by hand and then 3D scanned and animated on the computer.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, I see, I see. Yeah, this you say this it's blurring reality and animation as well.
Yeah, so my point with this whole endeavor is to, I was looking to make um, a digital human that is hard to decipher whether it's real or not. It's hard to, um, at times, it's hard to see whether you're questioning, is this a human or is this an animated character? So that was my main um, challenge. And there's something called the uncanny valley that animators often refer to, which is the difference between having something that looks real and having something that looks not real. There are certain traits and aspects about a person that you look at when you're looking at a video or a picture, and it just makes your brain conceive that as a real person. So getting those those little nuances down and making this fully articulating human that is digital was, took years of studying and developing that um, this animation method. Um, so yeah, and as I was saying with the rigging, it actually is very similar to a real human skeleton because you're actually setting up very, it's practically like you're creating a human skeleton within this, character. And on top of that, you have to study anatomy because it's all about, like muscle groups of the face and getting, the wrinkles to deform properly. So it definitely is a long process that takes a lot.
That's why I said you need to be passionate about it because it takes a lot of time. This work, it's consuming, but it's a good work, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's really rewarding. I can't tell you how rewarding it is. It's one of the most cool things to me to be able to look at something that you gave birth to on the computer or that you sculpted by hand and see this inanimate object come to life. So that's like one of the coolest things to me that really drives my passion for this. And I think when people sort of see that thing, at one of these characters, they are they're usually asking themselves how is this done? Is this like a video of a person or something like that? So that's why it can be a challenge to describe to people what it is that actually goes into this and how extensive of a process it is.
Because people might think it could be generated via
Right, by
yeah,
AI.
AI. Yeah. What do you think?
Right. So what I'd say to that is anything with AI is they've been able to generate AI characters and animations. What I would say to them is that uh, as of right now, you can't generate anything longer than a few seconds worth of AI imagery. And on top of that, of course, I'm sure you could get a 3D render based off of AI, but the smoothness of it and the actual 3D model, um, you would not be able to come up with uh, as I was describing, like a polygonal mesh or anything like that with AI. It's very limited, and any faces that I've seen created with AI that are animated usually look weird. They don't. It's not able to actually grasp, the realism, and um, AI is, I think it's a powerful thing and it's amazing, but at the same time, it is harmful to artists such as myself, where people might get, perceive that it's something that it created. But I could tell you that for what I'm doing, everything is from scratch. Everything's handmade. The wrinkles on the skin, the coloring, the teeth, the eyes, the sclera, the iris. Every part of it is actually done by hand by me. And usually, as I said, I sculpt them by hand, and the majority of them I 3D scan, and then on the computer, I have to do even more detailing. So, as I was describing to you, so you're sculpting pores, pore level detail, and wrinkles, and things like that. And I actually have some time lapses showing the making of these characters. But I think what it is for anyone who was concerned that this was I would say that you would not be able to produce um, a short film with AI, and you wouldn't be able to get the well as the other opportunities that are available at film festivals like Mill Valley and the Cannes Short Film Festival, which I've really been interested in. But the marketing opportunities for these films is what actually um, really is what's worth it. You know, for a filmmaker, when you bring a film to a film festival, it's not just about screening it there and winning an award. There's often opportunities to pitch your film to people who might want to purchase it and produce it, and there's opportunities to market it and all of those things, or get it distributed for screening at theaters. There's a lot of really cool opportunities at these film festivals. So um, I think being that I went with my past, and won the awards that I did at Mill Valley and Catalina, and the ones that I had mentioned, uh, that I can now take that experience and go back to these film festivals with something that's way more developed and exciting. Uh, and I think that it's going to allow me to um, sell, sell this short film um, as a teaser for the feature film. So I think it'll definitely leave people wanting to see more of this, story. As I said, it leaves off the short film leaves off on a very uh, exciting point. You're sort of on a cliffhanger because um, the protagonist rider is jumping onto a train on top of a train, a moving train, and riding away. So he's sort of breaking away from this uh, imprisonment he's been in this orphanage. Um, I think I think that is going to be an exciting thing to bring to back to these film festivals. And again, before years ago, the claymation that I was doing is so primitive compared to the methods that I'm doing now. But again, it stood on its own. They did the previous films I did because claymation is much different than what I'm doing now with pre-built characters with all of these things that I was describing. I actually sculpt them and make a mold, so that they can be mass produced. And there's major differences in what I was doing back then and now. And I thinking about it, being that those my previous films were so did as well as I'm saying at those film festivals. I think it's going to be exciting to bring something like this back there. That I've now honed my abilities, and I'm working with professionals, and uh, so that's going to be an exciting opportunity. And marketing the film for feature film, that's my main aspiration.
Mm. So this short film is like a business card. It's like
Yes,
I'm capable of doing that. So trust me for the next one for the feature film, basically.
right, exactly. And if I so with the crowdfunder that that I showed you, that you're describing, I'm taking this film and raising $40,000, which is actually not a lot in terms of what I'll be able to do with it, because I think that it's not going to take me a long time to produce this, and there's some really new and exciting techniques and things that we're using with it. So with the feature film, I'd obviously need a studio to come along and be, yeah, like co-produce it with a studio or have them produce it. But for now, it shows, look how much I can do by myself with this amount of funding. It's really not a lot, and if I had that funding, when I have the funding, I'll be able to do everything I need to with this film. So that's the exact point of the crowdfunder, and it'll allow me, So not only are you pledging to donate to this film, a short film, which is really exciting and cool in itself. There's going to be a feature film that's already written that you are going to be being credited for uh, making that possible. You're going to be making possible what I think is going to be a historic step in animation history.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay. All right. Okay, right. The next questions, like, okay, you always wanted to do this job. Can you make a living with that, or you have to have a day job, or you have to?
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually it is having the wherewithal or the funding to create this thing and also live at the same time is can be a challenge for a freelancing artist such as myself. Um, and with these characters that I sculpt, these portraits, I have had over the years countless people approach me and they're saying, will you sculpt this person or this celebrity? And of course I can. In fact, I have, if you go and check out my Instagram or my social media or my website, you'll see these characters that are well known actors, head sculpts that I've done of well known actors and people that you'll recognize, and those characters are not for use in animation. I did those just to show my sculpting abilities and to convey, my ability to, recreate someone's head and make it look just like, their actual head from hand by hand. So I've had a lot of requests for people who want me to do custom commissions and do sculpts, and I do, like I said, life size, so sculpts like this and little miniature things like that. And I find it to be a little bit more challenging to get the detail out of the little ones, but it's a really cool art form because it's just something that's really small. So I actually just started selling on the side. I started producing and selling some sculpts, and made a mold, and I'm mass producing them. But again, it's really it's can be a challenge to be working on this film and also trying to produce sculptures on the side to sell, to support myself. So um, as I've been doing for the past few years, I take on freelance jobs um, for music videos and for photography or videography work that sort of is within my wheelhouse, to, as a side income. But that's sort of, um, I never let that, the time that I'm spending on those jobs get in the way of, what I'm doing with this film. So I find myself at times just staying up all night, which I do often, or, getting no sleep because I'm just trying to get this animation technique developed. And um, it's definitely an extensive process, but there's a lot of freelance work that I do get involved in on the side, and that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's when you're passionate about a project and you take you put some time, your time basically. Your time is the most valuable thing in the world, but you want to create, and creating something like a film
Yeah,
project. It's and when you see it, when it's released, and you show, you screen it to to the audience, that's done, that's it. You want to, because you start from here, your heart, and then you want to reach the audience, and in their they touched, it's touché, it's like a
yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, that's, I really love that, your way of putting it. That's an astute observation because getting in touch with the audience and reaching your target demographic is one of the biggest challenges as a filmmaker. Again, um, and you have to be just as good at raising funding for the film as you are as a filmmaker. So, um, for me, animation can be something that's tough because you'll have there are audiences that are really into it, and then there are people that are just not so into it. And sometimes older people can be like that. There's this, like, I think above 65, the age of 65, you're gonna it varies whether they actually are gonna be interested in watching it or not. But or be able to comprehend like what it is that you're talking about. But so there's a demographic, I think, that you have to go after for animation.
Sure, sure. Any film, basically, it's a project to sell, and you need to think about the distribution
Yeah,
first in order to think about the shootings and preparation and stuff like this.
yeah,
So, yeah, you have to market your film, and yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I think when you and I think that the it's so rewarding to me for these sculptures because people look at them and they really appreciate the likenesses and how much it'll look like a real person or like this person. So for me, that's something that really drives me and makes me want to do it more.
yeah, definitely. Uh, what is I'm gonna? Ah, yeah. The next question. Um, Nowadays, with the technology, like you can buy a computer with the video editing, you can buy a camera, you can start to make a film. And with the technology nowadays, we talked earlier, like the AI, stuff like this. So it's accessible, basically. Anyone can make a film. And what do you think about the future of cinema?
I think that it's being where I'm at right now. Uh, it's a testament to how far in 10 years I think that, as you were saying with AI, like what are the challenges of someone thinking it's AI? Right now, that might not be an issue for me as an artist, a digital artist, and animation. But in 10 years, I guarantee that you'll be able to do what I'm doing in the click of a button. And something that what I do takes months and months to develop, or like now that I haven't developed, takes like a month to build a character, or like more, and all of these intricate processes. I think that that's something that'll be generated from the click of a button within 10 years, which is kind of scary and kind of like upsetting for me as an artist. But again, it's like the actual artists are being removed from the industry. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are made obsolete by the use of AI in the next 10 years.
Yeah, it's a game changer basically, and it
Yeah,
can add something in a project, or it can remove some people in a process.
right.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I don't know. It's like before going to the factory, they uh, they set up some robots, machines, stuff like this. The new technology. I think there is a saying in Hollywood. They say it's adapt or die. But I think
Yeah,
it is very accurate at the moment. It's
it is. It's very accurate, especially with the writer strikes that are happening, now. It's really bad. And another thing is, I think the storyline in itself is, for my film, very exciting and unique, and something that people will, um, gravitate towards. I think that when they see, if this was when it's made into a feature film, I envision it as something that'll, be have trailers that will really draw people in to see it, or to the theaters. Um, and as you're saying, with the future of cinema, uh, there have been films made in the past few years that I feel are, and more so now, that are sort of lacking in story structure. And really, I feel as though it's degrading more and more the quality of these films. And so I think, and I don't want to sound pretentious or anything, but I think that I really do have something exciting and unique, and the story itself um, is very captivating and poignant. So I think that that's the story itself, mixed with the animation, is is really going to be a successful combination, and people will want to go see it. I guarantee you want to go see it. You're going to be really blown away. When you go to actually see the final film, Rider on the Storm, which will be available in the next few months. By April, we'll be distributing it and it'll be released. But you will be very impressed, and sort of, I think you'll be very shocked at how real these characters are going to look.
I want to be in the future to see it.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be exciting. On top of that, with this thing that I've developed, I think whichever way, if I were to sell it to a studio, or if it was, if I co-produced it with a studio, the feature film, whatever it's gonna be, I think that they'll be able to see the way that I'm trying to go with it, and whether or not it's produced the way that I want it to be produced when it comes down to doing the feature film. Um, I think that it's going to be, I've never seen a film. There are films like Avatar and other animated films that are very realistic. There are a lot of hyper realistic films out there. But for me, I've always wanted to see a film that really blurs the line between reality and animation. That is actually animation. That it's not, a mix of live action and CG, something like that. Which, in the recent Avatar movie that came out, I actually had the honor of getting to talk to people at Weta Studios who produced that film, and a couple of animators who gave me really big insight on how to achieve such a realistic animation, and characters and different techniques that they use. Um, so I think a lot of people have this notion of Hollywood movies and things like that, that it's a certain quality that can't be obtained unless you have like millions of dollars, and that's not true at all. You do need money, but at the same time, you can produce what I'm doing, which is a 5-minute showcase of something that is at the level of what they're doing in Hollywood, with a small amount of money. And the reason I'm able to do that is because I actually developed the animation that I'm using, the characters and the rigging and everything like that. Um, it sort of, I was able to cut costs a lot in the way that I'm sort of using my own methodology for this. But um, yeah, it's an exciting thing, and I think that so for the future of animation, I would very much like to um, be the next big animated film, and it will definitely be. I know that this is going to be, with the support that I'm looking for, this is going to be a groundbreaking animated film, and I intend on sort of setting the bar for what can be done independently and by yourself with animation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's all exciting because everything is exciting. It's like sometimes you have this kind of project is once in a lifetime. Sometimes it
Yeah,
happens once in a lifetime, and you have to make it. And when you see it, when you see the opportunity, you grab it and you make it. That's it.
that's a great. I like the way you said that. That's really good.
I try to I try to express myself in English, but sometimes it's rusty, but that's all right. So yeah, it's being part
No,
of the project, creative project, and yeah, something like it can be you can inspire some other artists as well. So
I think that's also another thing is I've seen another artist I've been inspired by, a filmmaker who won actually an Academy Award for a short film they did, was uh, Susan. Sorry, I'm missing. I can't remember her last name, but it's she produced a film called Peter and the Wolf, a stop motion film, and she was she it won an Academy Award, and it's unfortunate I can't think of her name. I'm such a huge fan, but she actually had this huge team that worked on the developing this film and everything, and they created these. She was actually doing it, I think, in Ukraine or something like that at the time.
did you say it's called Peter and the
Peter and the
Wolf?
Wolf, stop motion film.
It's a short film, right?
Yes,
I think it's yeah, I think it's that one. Um, directed by Susie Templeton.
that's the one, right? So Susie Templeton, she's been a huge inspiration to me. And I think they were based in Ukraine, or I'm not sure. Yeah. So, but well, what they did when they were producing that film is they hired a lot of local talent, which is oftentimes what these stop motion films and things like that will do. Because there are a lot of artisans, as you were saying, outsourcing. There are a lot of artisans that you can put to work, and give a lot of work to the area uh, by hiring them. And I think that's also a really cool opportunity for films. And why I'd really like to get this funded is because there are certain artists that I can reach out to in the area, and bring some infrastructure to some of those artists in the area and give them opportunities to be hired and work on this film. So with Susie Templeton, they were building these massive sets that were like, I mean, just 2 stories high. I mean, like really huge sets, crazy stuff that were, forest scapes and landscapes and buildings and things like that. And when I saw that years ago, I was just blown away. I was so inspired by that. And then seeing, also I was very inspired by books like I Spy, where they have the miniature sets and things like that. I was always really into that. But actually, that's actually what sort of drove me to do this. And seeing those physical sets and the objects in stop motion, they really jump out of the screen and make you feel as though it's like alive and animated. And I think that's something that can be missing with CG, which is why I'm trying to sort of implement the facial animation. But the so I would go, as I was saying, started out with Dream With Me, my last film, building these massive sets indoors to try to recreate what I was seeing with Susie Templeton and those guys. And so I would build an entire room into an outdoor set, a miniature set, and mountainscapes and
Some
ponds and
some details on different.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, the little tiny details, and I was really into that. And so then after a few years, as I said, I started developing these set props and sets and characters to be more worthy of a production that I'm talking about. Making molds for them and making them so that you can mass produce these things and that they'll last for a long time. Because again, in claymation, using materials that don't hold up. You're using a hot light or something, the clay can warp and melt and things like that. So when you're using a mold and you're fabricating these characters, you can actually create something that lasts and can be, animated over and over again under a hot light or any kind of light. Um, and so for the sets, I would take foam board and build. I'm going to send you some pictures of them. But these sets were, you know, like huge. I mean, huge, and they're buildings, and so
So
yeah, they're really exciting.
it's like very like an immersion into this world, and you
Yes.
just navigate it to this kind of yeah scene and yeah.
Yeah, and it's you're almost living in this world, this miniature world, and so oftentimes I would be inspired by the French chateaus and think like the French dormers and things like that. Those really beautiful ornate buildings that are Paris and France, and the dormers and things like that, and the pillars, and I really studied a lot of that stuff and would create these miniature buildings that were based off of those, and other buildings because I was really just into that ornate style. So I would make them with foam board and use an X-Acto knife and cut these little tiny pieces out and then make a huge miniature building and they would take up an entire room. Um, and the same thing with trees and things like that. I was using wire for to create these trees, and then would use like textured paint and things, and uh, moss and all kinds of things to create these miniature trees that looked extremely real. And I think that's a lot of times in films now they use practical effects, and practical effects are basically when you have like a real explosion or you have like a real effect that's not being, doesn't involve the use of CGI animation. So back in the day, one of my biggest inspirations, a long time ago in the 80s and 60s, even before then, they used stop motion oftentimes and practical effects when they could not, when they didn't have the use of CGI. So they, incorporating that, uh, well, what I was saying is they kind of stopped using that years ago, and now there's been a resurgence of animators and or producers and directors that want to use practical effects because they have a certain feeling. Just like, for instance, Wes Anderson, just his latest film, uh, uh, Asteroid City, they there's these really cool behind the scenes videos. You should check them out of these trains, miniature trains, and the way that they actually built an entire set right in the desert for these trains, and making these shots, and they look extremely real. I mean, you think that they're real. So not only does it save money, it's really cool. So I think practical effects are something that I've always been into, and making the miniature sets and things like that. That's another aspect of it.
So talking about the opportunities, if you have the opportunity to work with, for example, Susie Tapleton or anybody else, would you like?
Oh, I would be so honored to work with any of those people. Uh, I've always dreamed of working with Wes Anderson or one of Tim Burton, and I actually I intend on getting to show them my work at some point because I really do feel as though my own style and the animation that I've created is worthy of being seen by them, and I really think that it will. That's another thing is if you're really inspired by someone as an artist, you can always reach out to them, there's always a way to get through to them. Well, usually, and if you can, it's really an inspiring thing. It's really influential to have someone that you really care about, or that you look up to, say something about your work or get to notice it. So I always encourage artists to try to reach out to people that they're inspired by, and get in touch. That's also, like you said, reaching people and getting your work to people. You oftentimes want to make those connections in the industry and get to talk to those people and people that you look up to. you know any connection that you can make in the industry, it always offers you something. And you should always be trying to communicate in that way.
Definitely, definitely. Connecting to people is like I don't know, creating, sharing, experience different stuff. So it's human.
Yeah,
It's human. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that what you're saying is a good way of putting it. Showing who you are, and that you're human is really a big part of it. Because sometimes, even to think about a job interview or something like that, it's difficult to present yourself, if you don't talk to the person and communicate. The big part of it is communication. And although we're talking on, video call right now, it is still. I feel as though you really get a feeling for someone when you see them in person, or when you get to know them in person. So I'm sure it would be different talking to you in person.
Of course, yeah, yeah, it would be different. Yeah, of course. Even though working, it would be different. Even though hanging out would be different.
Yes.
So even environment, it would be different. But I think it would be the same kind of vibe, But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
But no, my point is though that if you ever get the chance to present a film at a film festival or pitch it or anything like that, it gives you a really good opportunity in person, I mean, or even on video call. You could do that too. But it gives you a good opportunity to show who you are and actually present yourself to the person, because writing doesn't always cover it. It doesn't always feel the same.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Of course, face to face is the most real thing. It's more organic, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, Hello?
You still there?
Yeah, yeah. The picture. Okay, right.
Sorry, I was just adjusting something.
That's all right. No worries. Okay, okay. Tell me, what do you wish in the short term, mid term, and long term?
Oh, so current. Well, you know what? I would say right now that it's always been my drive to create a film that is seen by audiences worldwide, and that really gets a lot of critical acclaim. And this film is worthy of your critical acclaim. I mean, you've got to check it out. This is going to be really exciting. I mean, I'm going to be taking something that was created by hand that looks extremely real, 3D scanning it, and then these are going to be characters. And that principle alone is, I've talked to people and it gets them really excited. But um, you know, over the past 5 years, I've been this has developed, and at first I didn't think that it was going to be something that I never thought that I'd be able to pull off this sort of animation, and it just sort of happened. So you can't give up. You've always got to drive, and if you really want to do something, it's possible. There's nothing that money is not an issue with this kind of thing. With it as an artist, it depends on your talent and who you know. But I think it's going to be really it's going to be really exciting to see this thing come to life, and I you are not going to want to miss it. So over the past 5 years, I've been developing this, and I've had, as I said, I've talked to some really well-known people in the industry that have helped me get this animation method pegged and be able to do it. And so I sort of had that goal, and now that it's actually coming to fruition. I'm gonna produce this film, you know, by April, have it distributed, and bring it to the film festival circuit. And once I'm there, as I said, I'm looking to market the feature version of this film. So in 4 years, I would say time, I am going to be producing this film if it's not already been produced. So within 4 years, I guarantee you that this film, as a feature length version, will be being produced. I'd be, I'm so honored to be on this show. I'm so really, I've checked out your stuff, and I really am like a huge fan. And I think you're letting me. I really appreciate you letting me do this because it allows me to talk about it and express, how it is. And as I was saying, so the story is very exciting, and it's gonna stand on its own. And it's it's the time aspect of it, that it's based in the 60s, I think brings in a broad audience, but it sort of shows, you know sheds light on that sort of time frame, to younger audiences, and makes them sort of, puts them in that, back in time sort of thing. That's what I would like to accomplish with this. Because initially this started out, and the feature film was, I didn't really have the idea for the short until last year, but the feature film is supposed to be, totally encompasses the 60s, and has really cool music in it. And it's basically about these guys, that, this young orphan who sets across, goes across the country in search of freedom, and to release his mother's ashes from the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the only thing that he has. And along the way, he sort of meets up with a Vietnam war torn vet named Jim, as he's jumping on trains and traveling across the country and finding these various modes of transportation. And they're sort of turned to the life of thieves, only to survive. With only the intentions of innocent young men trying to survive. They're forced into thievery to get where they want to be. And he also sort of finds a girl, Ryder, the protagonist, meets a girl who's running away from the very type of family he wished he had. This girl that he meets is sort of running from an overbearing family who had lots of money and gave her everything she wanted but love. And so she's running. He meets up with her along the way, and she's like sort of running away from something herself, but that's much different. And along the way, they sort of romantically get involved, and then the film kind of turns into that. And this whole story, by the way, that's based in the 60s, is seen through the eyes of Ryder's uncle and his nephew years later. So about 50 years later, they're receiving this box with a journal in it from Ryder and pictures that tell his story from the 60s. Because what happened was, this uncle, Ryder was born. He was orphaned at a young age of 7 by the death of his mother, and his mother was in her early 20s when she died. So her brother, or Ryder's uncle, is only a few years older than Ryder. So he is actually, during this time where Ryder's running across the country and doing all these things, his uncle's trying to find him. And so eventually they meet up at the end of the story. But Ryder winds up running off with this girl, Rita, I described, and starting their own life together. But so years and years later, his uncle receives a box of journal with a journal and photos in it of Ryder's story, in his time spent going across the country in the '60s, and it sort of tells that whole story. So it's an interesting time frame.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big important journey,
Yeah,
and I don't know the outcome of more, but I think it's like a big journey. You want to be part of it, or you want to 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 take a look and to care
yes,
for characters and
yes,
to see
yeah.
what they can go through different situations and stuff like this.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a cool thing for me is I wanted to take this story that that one would think should be done as a live action film. It's kind of a story that could be done as live action. So the reason I'm doing it with animation is I'm looking to make it so real that at times you're thinking that it's a real person, and that to see to capture the human emotions and animate these characters to be real. Meanwhile, not using any real actors. I mean, that's going to be really exciting and cool to see. So you've got to check it out. It's going to be in theaters, or it's going to be distributed next April. So Rider on the Storm, and you have to check out the Kickstarter because any donation gets a reward, and there's a lot of really cool rewards. So you can get a head sculpt, as I said, a custom head sculpt that was created for the film, and there are some pictures, but you can also get DVDs that are signed and screen credits for the film. So it's a really exciting opportunity to not only help bring this vision to life, but to make a a feature film out of this in the next 4 years, because you're allowing me to produce this film that will then grow, that will be used to market that film. So in other words, without this short film, I can't produce the feature film. But I need to produce this short film to be able to show people what it is that I want to do, and how
Mm.
it's going to look.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, okay, right. Do you have any tips for a newcomer in the industry in filmmaking who's gonna start?
I think I think anyone that wants to get involved in this sort of thing is they should absolutely go for it. Go for it. It's the most inspiring lifestyle. Just getting up and doing this and this animation. Any form of animation, whether it's 2D animation or 3D or sketch, illustration, uh, cell animation, stop motion, all of those things. I'm a huge fan, and if you're at all into drawing or any of those things, I highly advise to try animating, because it's extremely rewarding, and it's something that you have to have patience for, but a lot of patience. It really takes a lot of patience, but when you start to do it, you'll realize that these lengthy sessions where you're sitting there animating something turn into a masterpiece, and you could even do it with a flip book if you sat there and drew each cell, and then you go through it. It's like, oh, that's cool, but just to see something that's inanimate come to life, a non-living object come to life, and be able to bring it to life is almost like feels, I wouldn't say godlike in a way, but it feels like you're controlling this world, and it's really it's something that will really drive you to And if you're already into animation, it's there's nothing that is hard about it. If you enjoy doing it, do it. Honestly, sculpting, it's all mind over matter. When I first started sculpting, I wasn't getting, none of my sculptures actually looked realistic, or they were lacking in so many things years ago. And as I started to get to know more people in the industry and watch tutorials and take some classes online, I realized that it's so easy. It's so easy. It's mind over matter. If you tell your mind that you can do it, then you can do it. If you tell yourself you can't, you're not going to be able to. But a lot of things. One good tip for sculptors is you take, if you have a clear piece of paper, like a clear piece of cellophane paper, or printable paper, and you go on and you get like a what would it be, a 6 by 9 or whatever it is, grid, a layout, and you print that out. You can then use that. If you have a picture of a person, you can put that grid over the top of someone's face and find where those lines on the face line up for sculpting purposes, and then do the same thing with your sculpture. And you can even like size an image down and print it out so that you have the same reference of an image. And it becomes very easy when you start to see how these people that sculpt, the way that you might be looking up to, or these realistic sculptures, you find out they're just regular people, and it's not something that you have to be born with. You can do anything that you like especially with animation, and bring ideas to life that you might, that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. The thing about animation and live action is, you can have something very real, but you could also have something that over articulates and that you can make very animated. You know what I mean? And something that really, like someone who is very, uh, you know, like a gymnast or something like that. You could make them doing all kinds of unrealistic movement that still looks really cool, that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with a real person. So that's one side of it. And then when you have, um, so you can do both. You can have realism, and you can also have, you know um, animation that's stylized to look a certain way. So there's so much that you can do with it, and I think that's another thing I wanted to achieve with this film is, yeah, I want to have animation and real, very realistic animation that makes you think they're real. At the same time, I'd like to have stylization in some scenes where you might laugh because something is like very over articulated, or something like that.
All right. Uh, two more questions and then that's it.
Okay.
No, because it's very passionate. Very
Yeah.
passionate. This kind of project. In a career or in filmography, it's like it's not all the same. It's not forever. It's not forever. It's not always the same case. It's like once every 10 years or 5 years. This kind of. That's why
Yeah.
it's you're passionate about it and you go for it. Go. That's
Yeah, you couldn't have said that any better, because what happens is people, and every 10 years there's advancements in the industry that sort of really are game changers. And as I said, this AI thing is really a game changer. So um, I think you're going to see that in the next 10 years there's something else, new and exciting, and it's made even easier. So that's there's always advancements that are coming out that make things more intuitive, more easy to use, user friendly.
mm, yeah, definitely. I think we talked about AI just previously, but it's gonna change all the way of making films basically, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's gonna change everything. Everything is evolving basically in any kind
it
of
is.
domain, everywhere, everything basically, and
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why I want to jump on this now, because it's like this is the time to do it. If you're into animation, there is a lot of opportunity right now, and
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff to be done and exciting opportunities out there. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Tell me, which movie or series that looks like you?
That inspired me.
No, the movie or the series that are the same as you, that looks like you.
That is very much like my film. You mean?
Yeah, like you. Yeah, yeah, basically.
I think a film that is very similar to mine is actually I'll name a couple films that inspired the screenplay. A couple of them were Easy Rider, which is an American classic film
Motorcycle.
about
Yeah,
yeah the money right
mm.
yeah so
Freedom, freedom.
that yeah yeah you got it no I like that so um those actors Peter Fonda and I'm missing his name, but those actors,
Nicholson. Yeah, Dennis
yes,
Hopper, Jack Nicholson, Peter Fonda. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
yeah, right. So those characters were huge to me, and the actual story and the music that they used really just really big inspiration to me, and how I was conceiving this, because as I said, the feature film is a timepiece based in the '60s, and a lot of those stories were like really grabbed my attention and made me go like, this is exciting. Because again, in the '60s, they were developing new styles, and there were young directors like and writers like Francis Ford Coppola and others that were sort of coming out of the woodworks, and they were giving them an artistic freedom that they didn't otherwise have, like with Alfred Hitchcock and those previous directors. They were sort of on a certain way. There's a certain way to produce a film and things that you wouldn't do. I think there was a lot of experimentation in the '60s, and that really developed film and changed the way the film is. So, for me, Easy Rider and well, this one's based in the '60s, but not made in the '60s. But
Ah,
Fear
yeah,
and
yeah,
Loathing
yeah.
in Las Vegas,
Sorry, Johnny Depp.
um, you know, uh, and some of the current films that I really am inspired by, that I'd like to draw inspiration from, are Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel, and uh, pretty much all of his movies have been major inspiration in the style that he chooses to do, the colors, the color palette, um, and Tim Burton, and that's kind of a wide, broad range of inspiration, but um, I think there are like aspects of all these people that I try to draw inspiration from. Like those ornate buildings I was discussing was Tim Burton, that I would see them being made for stop motion, and the sets, the forest sets and things like that I build are oftentimes Wes Anderson would do things like that, and the buildings that he makes, and on top of that, the music that is used in these movies is something that I really, really try to, you know, have, because it's 50% visual, 50% audio, and they both are equally as important. And with the film, with the soundtrack, it's important that you have something that's exciting and really gets people's attention. So for me, I'm a big fan of vintage music, and music that's from the '60s. Um, so a lot of those songs and things like that, as I said, the Doors are like major inspiration for this film, and very much written for the music. So yes. So well, essentially, as I've been saying, the thing that I'd like to promote is my film, and So go check out the Kickstarter. This is yeah, I really really appreciate that, the link. um, because I guarantee you that you are going to be really really blown away when you go and check out this film, and when you see it from your computer or wherever, or from your TV. It's going to be something that really defines what can be done as an independent, animator and artist. I think that, sculpting these things from hand that I've done and developing such realistic characters is absolutely uh, changes things for animation and adds such a depth that otherwise is, it's very different. Um, so I please go check out Rider on the Storm, the Kickstarter. Please share and donate, even $1. Any donation gets a reward, and there's really cool rewards. So go check them out. There's you can receive a character sculpt for the film, limited edition, a private screening, DVDs, signed DVDs, movie posters, all kinds of cool stuff. And it's a really exciting story that I think is going to captivate audiences of all ages. So please go check it out, and stay tuned for Rider on the Storm, because it's coming, and it's going to be something that you don't want to miss.